Boom, everybody. Crazy shit goes on out there. UFOs attacking people in Brazil. Brazil in particular. What a fascinating part of the world, right? One of the largest countries by landmass. Mostly covered in that dense bit of jungle called the Amazon rainforest, with the largest river running through. Just one of the most fertile places for the imagination to go. Perhaps even more fertile than the depths of space. And it's interesting that I should mention that because the two come together here. In this article I found while looking for interesting tidbits on mysteriousuniverse.org. It's written by Brent Swanser, published April 21st, 2020. A UFO attack, the mysterious and deadly Barroso incident. This goes on to recount the tale of a farmer who had a couple of freaky dudes come down in a thing that sounded like bumblebees and shoot some lights at him. He had some unexplained injuries, kind of burn-like, from what I read, unless I'm misremembering, and afterwards his mental state completely decayed. So, let's be lame and lazy and just go through this paragraph by paragraph because it is 9:30 p.m. And I'm squeezing it in here, but I don't think it's going to hurt too much to squeeze. At least not as much as the sucking sound of sterility. Alright, let's begin, shall we? But first, a sip of scotch. The most spectacular UFO accounts seem to revolve around those in which some sort of physical evidence has been left behind. And the more sinister of these is when this evidence takes the form of physical injury upon a person that seems indicative of some sort of aggressive action. Are UFOs benevolent or not? It is not a question that has really been adequately answered, but in at least some accounts it seems to decidedly be the latter. There are in fact quite a few cases of UFOs allegedly attacking human beings, and one of the most harrowing of these is one that supposedly occurred in Brazil in the 1970s. It is a spooky glimpse into the possible darker agenda of this phenomenon, and remains one of the few cases of a human being said to have died directly due to a UFO encounter. Luis Barroso Fernandez was a simple farmer living on a rural property near the town of Quixada in the city of Ceará in Brazil. He led a humble, simple life, but things would get very bizarre on April 3rd, 1976, when Fernandez was out doing a routine check of his cattle. It was just after 2 a.m., his usual time for doing this weekly chore. But this time would be far from usual. As he made his way along the property in a horse-drawn wagon, he allegedly saw a metal craft that looked sort of like a disc descend to hover over the ground not far away, emanating a sound like a swarm of bees. The baffled farmer had never seen anything like this, and was both terrified and filled with curiosity at the same time. And his horse was getting very upset about it all. He would later tell his son that as he stared at the strange sight, the craft had suddenly fired a blindingly bright beam of light at him, and two beings holding what looked like flashlights came out to aim their devices at him, after which they re-entered the craft, and it simply sped off into the sky. Fernandez would say, "We received a light and were totally stopped, unable to move the animal and I, of course. It opened up a kind of door and appeared two short-stature beings. They were normal people, albeit with weird clothes and a kind of flashlight in hand. Pointed one beam of light at us and I lost consciousness." It's pretty harrowing, as it said. If true. However, for the farmer, it would turn out to be far from the end of this incident. Fernandez would describe how he had lost consciousness, only to wake with a splitting headache and a difficulty breathing and moving his limbs. Even more alarming was that one side of his body seemed to be deeply burned, as if a severe sunburn, even though it had been in the hours of darkness. That perhaps be radiation? He managed to make his way home, but was in such pain that his family arranged for him to be examined by a doctor in town. The doctor did not really buy the farmer's story of the UFO, but was also unable to explain the anomalous injuries to his body, and ended up just sending him home with some medication to rest in bed. It was still not over, though, and things would only get weirder from here. And here it goes on to recount how his condition got progressively worse and led to a complete mental decline with some very strange bodily changes and eventual death. Over the next few weeks, Fernandez was described by his family as slowly losing his mental facilities. He began to mentally devolve, in a sense, becoming more and more childlike as the days and weeks went on, seeming to revert to a child's state. Making it even more anomalous was that his skin also seemed to be getting younger, healing from the burns and taking on a youthful glow far younger than his years. Yes, but why was there no photographs included? This article presents the one right after the attack, when he was all old, leading his son Francisco Leonardo Barroso to comment that it was as though it had grown over again. During this time, he was examined by many medical and psychiatric specialists who could not figure out what was wrong with him. In the meantime, despite his more youthful appearance, his health rapidly deteriorated, as did his mental state. Indeed, whatever was ailing him eventually killed him, with Fernandez passing away from his condition in 1993. According to those around him, by the time he died, he had so completely lost his mind that he was purportedly only able to say "mom," "give," and "fear." UFO researcher Philip Mantle, author of the book UFO Contacts in Brazil, has said of the bizarre incident. Many people claim to have come into direct contact with a UFO, and some even claim that it has hurt them as a result. A bruise here, a small cut there, but Luis Barroso Fernandez may be the first person ever killed after his encounter with a UFO. Contact with a UFO is not common at all, but when the UFO in question shoots a beam of light at you, a light that hits you in full in the face, is extremely rare. This is what happened to Luis Barroso Fernandez. The illness that followed him immediately after this encounter is bizarre, to say the least, and went undiagnosed by a number of different doctors. Did the beam of light that hit him cause these illnesses and eventually his death? We will probably never know, but this is one of the most bizarre and rarest such close encounters on record. Of that there is no doubt. So, very strange, if true, and even if partially true, very, very strange. This condition here that's being described about the younger physical appearance, but deteriorating mental state, and then the initial radiation-like injuries. Interestingly, this was not the end of the strange phenomenon that would revolve around the family and indeed the whole town. There would be many other reports of UFO sightings in the area, and Fernandez's own son would have his own odd experiences in the coming days. seeing UFOs on multiple occasions. More frightening still was that there is at least one other report of a UFO in the area of Quixada, seemingly attacking human beings. Here we have the account of Francisca Rosette da Silva, 23rd, and her brother Antonio Loido da Silva, 12, who were walking along a wooded area in the vicinity when they saw a blazing light through the trees. According to the witnesses, the light then shot a beam at Francisca, which burned her skin and left her disoriented and dizzy. Doctors would find her eyes to be swollen and bruises and burns on her body, although no cause could be determined. The brother Antonio was not injured in the incident and would say of what they saw, "What I saw, I did not want to see ever again. It was not a plane, helicopter, or another known thing. It was strange and threatening." What happened in this remote town, and what is it that plagued Luis Barroso Fernandez? Was this a malicious attack by UFO? And if so, why would these entities do so? Was it a defensive measure, or perhaps even accidental? It is unclear just what happened here, but Fernandez's case has never been adequately explained, and he is often touted as being one of the only human beings to ever be killed by a UFO. Whether it was real or not, it does leave us to ask ourselves whether UFOs are friendly or not, and poses the question of whether there are perhaps times where they have more sinister goals than we may realize. Well, so we had other people in the area, the Silva folks, saying this crazy UFO stuff going on around Quixada. Now, could the whole town be in on this for the tourism points? Because the 70s, I would assume, would have been after all of the stuff had gone down with Roswell and things. Maybe somehow they found out about that. But I find that to be highly dubious for a number of reasons, such as the fact that in the 70s, how much communication between the states and rural Brazil would there be? Now, as for the motive of the UFO, there's that whole ayahuasca thing where you're talking to interdimensional beings. And maybe it's a manifestation of the tribes and their relationship to the forest, trying to defend it from these settlers, as it were. I'm not making any moral judgment on these particular farmers and things, but maybe there was just kind of either a mix-up or what have you. But just throwing wild shots in the dark out there. Well, hey, this is going to be a brief one because it is very, very late. But thanks so much for joining me for a little bit of mystery on this daily variety show, or close to daily as it can be, the Fractal Standard, which is an offshoot off of my main website, the Fractal Journey, well, it is a journey, the Fractal Journal, where you'll find stories, ideas, and more. fractaljournal.com. Thanks so much for listening, and cheers.